What's going on? Hello, everybody. My name is Tim Daniel, and welcome to this week's edition of Late Night Reds Talk Live here on the Riverfront. It is our final episode before opening day, so I had to bring in some of the Riverfront panel to come hang with us tonight. We also have a really fun episode or interview later in the show with my good friend Jordan Schusterman of Cespedes BBQ. But until then, we're going to hang out with these guys here, starting with the godfather of the Riverfront. You can check him out on every Friday morning or Thursday. Well, I guess that's when you guys record it, so spoiler alert. But every Friday on the Riverfront feed, Mr. Chad Dotson. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. So happy to finally be back on with you here and just excited about the season and about Late Night Reds, and love this space with the interaction, and it's just let's go, man. I'm excited.
I am excited too, and joining us too, also host of the Riverfront Bagel Show, hanging out with us today. He texted me and said, "Man, you got to have me on Late Night Reds sometime. I got to get my Reds chat in," and so I had to bring him on today, even though he's wearing a Boston Red Sox jersey today. Joe Farfsing, how are you, pal?
I am good, man. I appreciate the opportunity to come on here. This will probably be the last time after you're done. You'll probably ban me from the show, but I'll make the most of it while I'm here.
Hey, man, I don't ban anybody unless you're mean. That's the only way I ban you. So you are okay. I think you'll be okay there. Oh my God, my ring light just fell. So hopefully that's not an omen for how the day is going to go. But
this is live entertainment. What are you going to do?
Yeah, that's right. So obviously, before we get into everything, you see the banner at the bottom. Chance, my boss is here, so I have to make sure I shout it out. Please, if you are checking this out and are already, please subscribe to the Riverfront YouTube channel. Just takes a couple seconds, and you'll get all of our shows on there. So all three of our shows. And also, join our Patreon. Hang out with us in Slack. It's a lot of fun. A lot of great conversation, a lot of great insight there. So we have a lot of good people that go in there and have some good conversations, give good Reds insights, ask great questions. It's a lot of fun. It's something I really enjoy for being part of the Riverfront team. So make sure to go ahead and do that as well. But let's go ahead, folks, and let's get into it. It is the week. Also, can we just go ahead and make mention? The Reds finished above 500 in spring training after their split today. So,
it's happening.
Hang the banner.
Hang the banner. That's right, Joe. You're absolutely right. So there's a lot that comes out of spring training. There's a lot of conversation, obviously, that people are kind of having about this, that, and this. And we'll get into quite a few of it. But I wanted to start here, guys, because it looks like our projected depth chart from Fangraphs is very uniquely interesting because it doesn't take into account for injuries, obviously. Of going on with Joey Votto projected as the starting first baseman, Nick Senzel projects the starting center fielder. But obviously the situation of Kevin Newman, Jose Barrero at shortstop, TJ Friedel, Will Myers, and then the DH situation where Jake Fraley is the most likely to get designated hitting at bats. So obviously we know that this team is probably not going to be the best situation to score a lot of runs. I still kind of have faith in the ball club more than I probably should. Not going to lie to you. But I do think that this is something to kind of look over real quick. So do you kind of take a look through this, guys, as far as the depth chart here around the playing time projections from our good friends over at Fangraphs? Is there anything particular that jumps out to you the most that you see here?
I'd say the first thing for me is the shortstop situation. Obviously, it has Kevin Newman 58% and Jose Barrero 30%. Barrero, of course, 8% as well in center field. I don't know. I feel like, and maybe some of this is me wish casting or wishful thinking, as I commonly do at this time of year. It's all about hope and, squinting to try to find the good things that we can see. But I don't know. I'm hopeful that Barrero is going to get the first shot at it and that he won't fall on his face at shortstop. I don't get the sense that Newman's really done much to
just let it shine through. Just let your soul, baby.
Oh, well, we need Carlos, don't we? We need Carlos here. But I don't know. I want to be optimistic about Barrero against all evidence from the past couple of years. But he's still a kid. He did look decent in the spring. Bring it on. So Kevin Newman, I hope Kevin Newman is happy. I hope that his family is always healthy. But I don't really care if he plays shortstop for the Reds.
Yeah, it's I mean, I'd have to agree that Barrero is probably going to get at least the first crack at starting shortstop. Again, I think he's there until he proves that that he can't handle it. I can't promise that he's going to handle it and he's going to be out there 150 games. But Newman was clearly brought in. I mean, there's a reason that they cut whatever the difference in price between him and Farmer was, because they didn't want all that money going to a backup, or they had him as a backup. And then with the splits in the outfield, I don't really know where to really go with that. I don't think Senzel is going to get the bulk of the time out in center field. He needs to get on the field first. Plus, they're working him more around the diamond. I think that's probably where he's best utilized, is kind of as a super utility guy. I mean, he's athletic enough to play pretty much anywhere. I mean, he even taking reps at shortstop, he could probably fill in. If Kyle Farmer can play a passable short, and a rare occurrence of a healthy Senzel can play shortstop too, but I don't think he's going to get 62% of the center field at bats. And I think Friedel is probably the fourth out, hell, maybe in the fifth outfielder too. So I think Benson's going to get a lot bigger share than he's being given on any of these projections. But again, this is, they're just throwing out there what they think is going to, none of these guys have a track record, so they're just kind of guessing like the rest of us.
Joe, what is the if Kyle Farmer could do this? What is the hate on the farm dog?
Come on, man.
Maybe that's the path for Nick Senzel, is to grow out a mullet. I mean, I don't know how his high school quarterbacking, I don't know if he was quarterback in high school like the farm dog was, but maybe he needs to embrace his inner farmer, and that's what's going to unleash the beast within.
I kind of like this idea of Nick Senzel basically being Ben Zobrist.
Yeah.
I think that could, if that was if there's a way that he can be on the field, that obviously makes the most sense. You mentioned Will Benson. I think he's kind of been the darling of spring training, obviously, as far as what they got from him. And, Steve Hatcher was just moved. We'll get into some of the transactions a little bit later into the show. But yeah, I think that, when you look at this, that's kind of things that jump out. I think too, if let's say, because they still have not made a decision on, will Joey be in the lineup on Thursday? So you got to think at that point, well, Myers is probably playing first base. That kind of moves some things around as well. So there's a lot of unique situations. I do know that Will Myers will be a fan favorite this year, strictly because they're going to find the way to be like, no batting gloves. He's got Cincinnati grit. Yeah. But
Latter-day Ron Oster.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a lock for the Reds Hall of Fame then.
Yep.
That's what we're saying. Yes.
Yep. Whether he's here a full season or half a season, one way or another.
I mean, a couple things here, but if I could just add on to what
Sure.
you guys both just said. First of all, Senzel. Obviously, I'm a Senzel homer. I think
Same.
that yes, yeah. If he's got to stay on the field, obviously, but he's an SEC guy, just like Kyle Farmer. So why can't he be the next Kyle Farmer? Kyle Farmer was about this age when he got to the Reds. It's all about health. But if they're serious about playing him all around the field, that's to me the only path that Senzel really has at this point. I mean, he could start in center field and hit like he did in the minors. No one's going to bet the ranch on that right now. But even if he doesn't do that, if he could just be a passable hitter and play 6 different positions, that's a valuable player in the big league. It's not going to be a superstar. It's not even going to be an all-star, but it's a guy that a team's going to want. And the other thing I want to say is just anytime we want to talk about Will Benson, please call me, because I'm desperately hopeful
Same
with Will Benson. He's my favorite player, I think, of all time at this point. And I'm just praying that he doesn't let me down, because I have these big dreams for Will Benson this year.
More than Lisa Verto Bonilla.
Well,
now those are big shoes to fill. Those are huge Ronald McDonald clown-sized shoes to fill.
Let's not be silly here, Joe.
Okay.
Let's not bring Lisa Verto.
Okay.
Yeah. Leave Lisa Verta out this. All right. Yeah, I'm with you, Will Benson, dude. And I think it's the younger me of just well, he's a tall center fielder for the Cincinnati Reds that wears number 30, and of course I'm like, well, that's what I grew up loving. So it's of course, very different players. One's maybe the top 15 player of all time, and one's Will Benson. I'm sorry, one's a top 15 player of all time. The other's Ken Griffey Jr. as Chad.
There we go.
Will Benson. Yeah, I'm with you. I'll tell you what. I know a lot of this season, the like slight ups possibilities depends a lot on the health of Indy and Stevenson. India was really, really good these last few weeks in spring training. I know it's spring training stats. We can't take anything to it, but he went in today. Like, I think he was hitting around 500 in his last couple weeks. He's stealing bases, which is really fun to see. He's playing like his hair's on fire again. So I think kind of having him.
That's a bonfire there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's some sweet lettuce. But I'm very excited for Jonathan Indy this year. I think he's going to really have a good year. I think Tyler Stevenson, I get into this a little bit with Jordan, not to kind of spoil what comes up in that conversation, but we've kind of discussed the plan for Tyler Stevenson and how the Reds did it was actually really well done, and how this is going to change things in the future for catchers. So like when Henry Davis comes up for the Pirates, what is that going to be like for them? Are they going to follow the Tyler Stevenson model? I think this is something you're going to see in baseball more often. I think this is just something that's out of the norm. Because one of the guys I brought up was Joey Bart from San Francisco. And it's like, well, he can't hit. And so like when you have a guy like Tyler Stevenson, the only other nationally catcher that could hit like he can is probably JT Realmuto. I can't think of it off the top of my head. Maybe Wilson Contreras will do really well.
I was going to say, do you count William Contreras? He can hit.
That's true.
He's kind of a DH. He's not behind the plate. Well, he wasn't behind the plate much because they had a lot of because they had good catching in Atlanta, but he can rake.
Actually, Kirk Caselli's not a terrible hitter at all. Actually,
yeah.
So I think he'll be good there. So Richard Thompson asked Chad, "Are you a Benson prospect hugger?" You can add Chad. You can add Tim Daniel to that list. We're gonna put Joe on there just because he's on the show tonight. Yeah,
Benson is the only prospect that I hug, though. He's the only one, but I adore him.
If it's Ellie, I'm not hugging. I'm turning the lights down low, throwing on some Luther Vandross, and it's
late night Reds talk.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, Joe's bringing the dynamic. Man,
it's after dark.
Yeah, I need to catch this Bengals show pretty more often. See what's going on there. Joseph says having Casale back is huge. He'll play lots too. I think Casale is going to bring so much as far as designated hitter, has played first base in the past, can catch. And I think, the Stevenson thing's just going to be a huge dynamic thing for them. I also think, and Chad, obviously, with how long you've been kind of following the team with Red Leg Nation coming here, I almost kind of feel like the Reds learned their lesson from Devin Mesoraco's injuries. And we're like, we can't go through that again because he was like a really special talent and it just had everything happen. And next thing you know, we're trading him for Matt Harvey. And it's like, we can't trade Tyler Stevenson for Matt Harvey.
You can. I think.
You literally probably could trade him for Matt Harvey. No, I think that's a good point, Tim. And I just think that with Stevenson, there's this opportunity that they didn't have with Mesoraco that you can sneak him into the lineup at DH occasionally.
True.
Of course, they've worked him at first base, and so that's an opportunity. I fear they're going to go too far in the direction of having him not behind the plate because when he's behind the plate, he's one of the top 2 or 3 catchers in baseball when he's healthy. In my mind, I mean, if he's a DH. He's a top 15 DH, maybe, or top 12 if you're being charitable, maybe.
Yeah. If he doesn't tap, because he's yet to tap into, I mean, he's a big, strong guy, and he's yet to tap into that power. And if you're playing him at DH or first base, then he's average, maybe even second tier, back half of starters.
Yeah, not going to hurt you anywhere you put him, unless you put him at shortstop. But as catcher, he's elite. And I understand the injury concerns, but as long as Stevenson wants to catch, I would try to get him back there as much as I could for that reason.
Now,
absolutely.
Tim, you might know better than I would, but from what I understood, from what I've read, they have all the games actually, like his entire schedule is mapped out. So they can, but I mean, they already have Casale and Luke Maley, and they have their entire rotation set. Obviously injuries, throw a wrench into everything, but. Like this is their plan for the entire season. I don't know if they even could, I mean, they can go back, if they want to put them more behind the plate, but that's, they've got 3 guys that they're already, working their way through.
Yeah. Branch brings up a point, the concern about concussions is obviously a big deal, especially with how far, that's come and, the concussions he went through last year. Yeah. You don't want him to get to that point where he's like an NFL fullback, and I certainly don't. But yeah, Joe, there is that point where they've brought that up. I also think too, having those 2 guys to be there, you got to think like Kirk Casale caught Luis Castillo. He caught Johnny Cueto. He caught, some really great pitchers in San Francisco. And then, he caught in Seattle for a year. Luke Maley was just part of the Brewers a couple years ago, was part of the Guardians last year with their awesome pitching staff. These are probably the kind of guys you want catching these big three.
Yeah.
Like, these big three up and comers, guys who have major league experience. And I think like that's going to be a perfect fit for them.
Can I just say, though, I think the Reds had one catcher last year, and then when Tyler Stevens got hurt, they had zero in the whole organization.
Yeah.
And Nick Krall, overcorrected, and he's got 1,000 catchers now. And I don't know that I agree with the idea of having 3 catchers on this roster. I really don't. I mean, I understand you're going to want to play Stevenson at first base and DH some, but if a catcher gets hurt, you can move him back behind the plate. That's the way I look at it. I don't mind having Maley. He's defensively, he's pretty good. He's got a gun. He's got an absolute gun. He's going. But I don't know that I'd have him on this roster. I think Kirk Casale is the perfect sort of guy to be next to Tyler Stevens, and in that he can hit a little. He's not going to embarrass himself with the bat, and he's not going to hurt you behind the plate either. He's kind of an ideal backup catcher. So, but this comes back to me wanting Stevenson to be behind the plate as much as possible. So I just don't like, they keep so many relievers these days that you barely have a bench anyway. And I don't like wasting a spot on a guy like Luke Maley, who really, maybe he'll hit, but he hasn't shown that he can't hit at this level, even if he's good enough to play defensively behind the plate.
So let me ask this of you. If Kirk Casale were your starting catcher and Luke Maley were your backup, would you feel okay?
Not hitting wise, but
right. But in terms of just, because that's kind of how the Reds, that's kind of how the Reds have it. Because Casale, I think he's in line to get more starts behind the dish. He's your starting catcher. Tyler Stevenson is the backup catcher and backup first baseman and backup DH. That's going to get 140. 100. Yeah. So I'm kind of trying to looking at it differently. Like, I don't mind having the third catcher because, again, Stevenson's going to be somewhere else anyway. And if he's DHing, and if Stevenson's DHing, then you don't have a backup catcher if you don't have Casale.
But there's a big difference between having Stevenson and, I don't know, Will Myers as your DH or somebody in the lineup versus having Stevenson and Kirk Casale in the lineup. To me, I'd rather have whoever's going to play DH when Casale's behind, or when Stevens behind the plate. Whoever's going to play DH is going to be able to hit more than Casale. Not that Casale's awful, but so I don't know. This team has to score some runs, and when the fourth and fifth starters are pitching, they're going to score a lot of runs. And so I don't know. That's the way I'm looking at it. I want as many bats as possible in the lineup.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. I truly don't mind the 3 catchers, especially. But I think especially the big reason I want Tyler Stevenson to continue to be behind the mound, behind the dish, is financially is a very big difference compared to if he's going to arbitration as a first baseman. So I want him to get his coin. And I think, I look out for guys. So this is Alex Wallace brings up the point. Asher's Maldonado is proof you don't need an offensive catcher. Yeah, very well, but it's a nice advantage to have. And he says, also if one catcher is a DH, loose if DH if catcher gets hurt.
Yeah. Okay, look, can I answer that?
Sure.
How many times have you seen a catcher get hurt and have to go out of the game?
How many times did Stevenson get pulled last year?
What, twice?
I mean, there's twice in one season. I'm answering.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. So if you get a catcher hurt in the 7th inning, and so you have to lose a DH for 3 innings, all right, it's not ideal. But how many other games could you use somebody on the bench other than Maley? That's the way I look at it. That's a legit concern. I don't disagree with Alex's concern there, but I just think it gets overblown. It happens so rarely. People say that's why you'd have to carry, you couldn't pinch hit your catcher late in the game. Yeah. You have to save him in case somebody gets hurt. It's ludicrous.
Yeah, it very rarely happens. And you've got someone who can, that they can catch the damn ball. If a pitcher throws it, that they can fill in a pinch. Also about the Astros, they're not offensively challenged like the Reds are. They've got 5 guys who I would say probably at least 5 guys who can have an OPS plus higher than anybody on the Reds. So it doesn't.
Yeah, that's the other part. If you've got a bunch of offensive guys around you, I'll take Luke Maley as my catcher. If you have 8 other great hitters.
Yeah, Ryan Hannigan would be perfectly fine.
Yeah, and Alex says he agrees on the overblown purge conversation there. So before we get kind of to that, obviously there's a lot of opening day conversation I want to get to. So Alex, not only did the Pirates have an emergency catcher last year, I went to a game where they played the Reds and Josh Van Meter caught against the Reds.
Right. I remember that.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
immortal Josh Van Meter.
Yeah, that happened. Spencer Steer, you know, I keep seeing today because, Jordan Walker made the Cardinals opening day roster, which is great. And look, Chad has been someone who's been very open and honest in his tenure about like how he feels about how the Reds front office manages certain things. But I think this thing where like I saw people commenting like, well, the Reds would never do this. It's like Jordan Walker, and it's like, have you like forgotten like four big time players in the Reds history the last 15 years of although three of them are on the roster right now, and Jonathan India, Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, Mike Leake literally skipped the minor leagues. We've got like all these players who are kind of having this conversation where, look, it's awesome for Jordan Walker. I think the Cardinals are going to be tremendous this year. They're probably going to win the division by, by 12 or 13 games. I don't think anyone's close to them. But this idea that like the Reds are like holding guys back and not, help push pitching their younger guys when literally their top two starters are guys who are in their second year is asinine to me. And I just was blown away by the stupidity of that comment.
Yeah, I had to kind of defend the Reds the other day, and I did on my podcast and then again on Twitter, because I was very vocal around the Nick Senzel thing. That because it was right after the Chris Bryant thing with the Cubs, and I was like, you got this guy, use him. If you lose a year of him later on, well, okay, open your pocketbook and pay him. That was my thing, but people are like, they're going to they're keeping Ellie De La Cruz down so they can gain an extra year, and I had to say, when's the last time they did it? They didn't do it with Hunter Green. They didn't do it with Nick Lodolo. I don't think there's any reason to believe they're going to do that. And matter of fact, I think there's even more reason to believe right now that they would bring those guys up a little early, just because they need guys that'll bring people to the ballpark. And Ellie De La Cruz, they're not going to keep him down for financial considerations 6 years in the future, 5 years into the future, if he can, if they can put up a billboard saying "Welcome, Ellie De La Cruz." So
we can help with the billboard.
I'll say I heard a guy that can do that.
No more billboards anytime soon. I think we had our fun.
Well, and I mean, you look at Barrero. He ostensibly came up too soon. I mean, he had no at bats above A ball. If I'm, in 2020 when he came up, Senzel is literally, I think, the only guy that I can think of that the Reds have could even be questioned playing.
The service time games
service
with
time
him.
manipulation, brain fart. And you kind of look at how his career, not that they knew what they were doing and thought, but I mean,
you can argue that.
Yeah. There's more proof that they, that they had a reason for that, a legitimate reason for that than, than they were doing it to just to save some money. I mean, Stevenson, they brought him up, in the middle of 2020, but they haven't been doing those games. I can't remember how early was Jay Bruce? I mean, this goes back to 2000.
May.
Okay. But that, but he also hadn't had many games above A ball, if I'm not mistaken.
It was the year after he was minor league player of the year in all of baseball. So it was like,
But he hadn't tasted AAA before that. If I'm not mistaken, that last year before he came up, he was, he had part of a season in only just part of a season in AA. And yes,
Stop it, Alex. Stop it, Alex.
Good old Scooter.
Alex Wallace's comment was Scooter blocked Senzel. Oh, Scooter. Good old Scooter.
Has Nick Senzel hit 4 home runs in his career?
I think he has I think his rookie year he hit 12.
This is the year, guys. I'm telling you. This is the year for Nick Senzel. Just take it to the bank.
I'm with you.
Is that Silicon Valley Bank we can take it to?
Yes.
Topical political humor. That's what you come here for.
Branch brings with current injuries the bullpen's kind of, but yeah, Joseph, this is a good point, and something I joke with in Jordan later in the interview. I don't want to spoil everything, but we definitely make fun of the fact that the idea for the fact that the Mets trading for Alexis Diaz is, well, his brother's on the team. And so we get into that for sure. But Branch brings up the point. He said Joey was upset with kept him down as long as he did. And maybe he was, but also he got, the biggest contract in franchise history. So I think he probably got over that pretty quickly.
It didn't harm him.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'll say this. I mean, he was what, 24 when he came up. This is a
Yeah.
Hall of Famer. Hall of Famers don't come up that late. If he'd come up at age 22, he might have struggled a little bit his first year or two. But
Yeah.
you know who else? You know, Greg Maddox came up at 21. Go look at his numbers. He struggled, but
He was
Joey would have
23.
figured it out.
He was 23. He turned 24 like a couple weeks later.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
So,
Joe.
Chad, you love doing you love
I do.
doing
I love it.
calls with me.
let's check out some. I actually had Joe do this research for me when I asked him to be on the show today. So we had some little fun because the season coming up. We're going to look at some Reds player odds for the betting people in the world out there. And some of these are kind of fun. And I kind of wanted to get a laugh at them. The first one I wanted to make sure I thought was just ridiculous was Joey Votto under 18.5 home runs at minus 125. If he plays 130 games, he's hitting 25 home runs. It's just going to happen. He knows that people doubt him now that he's going to be 40 and that, there's this and that. Plus, he does play 81 games at Great American Ballpark. Take the bank. He's going over that. Joe gave me some of his favorites that I really enjoyed. I really like Hunter Green plus 2,000 to lead the Major League Baseball in strikeouts because it sounds asinine when you say it out loud, but when you really think about it, you're like, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe?
He's going to get 35 start. Well, whatever. I mean, he's top of the rotation. He's not going to get none of his starts are going to get skipped. I mean, he's a high strikeout guy. He's as much of a workhorse. I mean, he's a second-year player, which means he's the workhorse in the rotation. He's going to be top 5 in the National League. If he throws 180 innings, he's going to be top 5 in the National League.
I'd lay some cash on that over 188.5 Ks, but I don't think I'd drop it on the plus 2,000 because he's going to come in second to Graham Ashcraft in Major League Baseball. In
He learned how to
looks like
strike
it.
Ashcraft's
Oh my God,
looking
it
good.
looks like, yeah. Oh my God. Well, that, Nick Lodolo plus 3,500 to lead the Major Leagues in strikeouts, too. So, I know Ito Sarah said that article this week on The Athletic is bold predictions. And one of them was that the Reds top 3 will be the best young three-man rotation, I think he said, since the 2006 Florida Marlins. And,
I needed that. I needed to
I know.
read that. That
that was a nice feeling. We talk about things like The Athletic having its value. That was like my yearly value of The Athletic right there. So thank you, Eno, who's actually been on Late Night Reds before. I'd like to have him back. So that's really interesting.
Let's get him back.
Yeah, for sure.
He looks like he has fun hair.
Dude, he has I don't know.
You do too, Joe.
Yeah. Chad and I have to wear hats, so
Exactly. That's all I'm saying.
yeah. I'll tell you what. Go ahead.
Now, I was just going to say, are you going to talk about the Alexis Diaz one here? Because that's the one I want to comment on.
Yes, because I wanted to make mention of this because Joe brought this to my attention about this one on a text message earlier. And one of the things he said was, I think it's a possibility he could get traded to where he could get in a situation like this where he could get more saves. And I think it's fascinating. I don't think the Reds are against trading Alexis Diaz at the right offers out there. I just don't think they're gung-ho on doing it if they don't have to. But I do think that's a fair point. Is what if they are out of it in July and, Raisel Iglesias isn't doing what he needs to do for the Braves, and the Braves are like, dude, look, we need Alexis Diaz. I think that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, if he's with Cincinnati all season, don't waste your money on him. He will not lead MLB in saves. There have been some conversation because of the Mets conversation in the wake of Alexis's brother getting hurt about trading for Alexis Diaz. And there's been some people, you can't trade him. He's probably their best reliever. And I'm of two minds. I think the Reds probably are going to be hesitant because they don't have a bullpen outside of him with the injury concerns. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, they absolutely should be open to trading Alexis Diaz. I really love Alexis Diaz. If he's a great reliever for the Reds for the next 6 years, that fantastic. Love it. But man, if somebody offers you something real for Alexis Diaz, you got to do it. I mean, relievers they're not fungible, but you really don't know what you're going to get year to year sometimes. And I don't want them to trade Alexis Diaz. Man, I'm taking every call if somebody's asking about it. If I'm Nick Krall, and I'm not Nick Krall, just for the record.
Thank God you can actually talk on a microphone. Did you see how stupid he made Jose Ramirez look today on a slider?
Yes. Oh my God.
Nick
Krall? Nick Krall?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
got just this nasty back foot slider. You wouldn't think it. The guy looks lame as hell, always wearing a sweater over a shirt like he's just coming back from a luncheon at Harvard. But no, Alexis Diaz just made. I mean, Jose Ramirez is. I mean, he's a stud. Like he's a fantastic. Not a lot of people can make him. He doesn't strike out much, and he looked like he looked like an absolute top spinning up there.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
I was blown away by that. I'll tell you what, guys. I know I'm going to be in the minority here. I think I might take the over on wins.
Yeah.
I think that with those three that you have at the top of your rotation, if India, Stevenson, and Votto are what they're supposed to be, it's, I know there's a lot of other questions in the lineup from there. How good is Spencer Steer going to be? I'm pretty high on his abilities. But I think with those 6 guys I just mentioned, it's going to be hard to lose, 97 games again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been saying it, and Joe's been saying it for a long time too, but everything went wrong last year. Literally everything went wrong. And so you got to believe, first of all, the under on 100 losses. Everybody's saying, another 100-loss season. Maybe. I mean, it's not like the Reds are a good team, but, there are, first of all, everything had to go wrong for them to lose 100, and they still barely lost 100. Yeah. And also, we have guys this year, to me anyway, I don't know. I know we had Castillo's early in the year, so we did have some better guys early in the year. But we also have some guys this year that are way better than the Aristides Aquinos of the world, or at least more hope for some of these guys.
Yeah.
I guess is the way I would look at it. I have more hope about the guys that are at this level and about to be on this level than I had for most of the Matt Reynolds types for the last couple of years. So, yeah, I think I go over, but that's a close one. I think I go over.
I think the floor is just been raised a bunch. Again, I've been, and we haven't really gotten to all the transactions, but the guys that they let go were guys that the last couple of years that they would keep around. They would keep around a Chad Penner or a Hunter Strickland, and like those guys have been jettisoned. And again, it's right. It doesn't. The injuries are already creeping up this season, and it hasn't even started, which is concerning. But they were the most injured team in all of Major League Baseball last year. And these were actual what few difference makers the team had. These were guys, Joey Votto missing a chunk of the year, Tyler Stevenson missing most of the year, Jonathan India missing a bunch of the year. Like these are actual frontline players, and you can't assume health, but you can't assume injuries either. So again, the floor, I think the absolute floor is probably 65 losses. Again, they're not going to win 75, 80 games, but I mean, I penciled them between 70 and 73 wins this year.
This year feels like, so the year they traded for Scott Rowland, they were 75 and 87, I believe. I don't think they're going to be that good necessarily, but it gives me the vibes of the year they traded for Scott Rowland, where it was like in 2009, it was at the trade deadline. I was like, okay, we have all these young guys coming up. They look like they're going to be ready. We need to get a veteran to kind of lead these guys. And, Scott Rowland was here for 3.5 years, did a good job. They went to the playoffs through those 3 years. He was a starter in the All-Star game, if anyone remembers, where he was the 7th alternate at third base in 2011. That happened. But hey, he's going to Cooperstown this year, so great for him. So yeah. I don't know if they're like as good as they were at that point. The system's obviously the best it's been probably since Votto and Bruce and Cueto came up. But I think this is kind of what that year kind of gives off to me.
Don't forget Homer Bailey was in that group too.
Yeah, he was. You're right.
I like the way you're thinking. A lot of that's going to depend on whether Elliot De La Cruz and Noelle Marte and
Edwin Arroyo,
Strand, those guys taking that next step and being the Jay Bruce and the Joey Votto. I mean, there's not going to be another Joey Votto, but it's going to depend on those guys taking that step. Whereas, Bruce and Votto, for example, did take that step. And so we'll see. I don't know, but I like the way you're thinking.
Yeah. That's why you hired me, to be optimistic. So, I didn't forget it this week. Also, our winner from last week, we still have not heard from. If you want to get your prize, please make sure you send us your address. But it is time for late night Reds trivia for this week. And this one's kind of an easy one, actually, compared to the last couple of weeks. But you guys have been awesome to chat who've been able to get this. Shout out Alex. Got a really awesome prize from me with the Chase Petty autograph card and a few other things. So, late night Reds trivia 3. In 1977, the Reds had a deal in place with the Oakland Athletics to receive pitcher Vida Blue that was voided by the commissioner Bowie Kuhn under the best interest in baseball clause. What was the trade package the Reds were supposed to send to the Oakland A's in return? So, Chad, Joe, I don't know if you guys, I know you guys saw the answer obviously later in the slides, but obviously one of those things, like one of those, I remember my dad telling me the story about this because we went to Cooperstown the year Sparky and Tony got inducted in 2000. And there's like a big cutout in one of the museum exhibits of Vita Blue. And then, I'm 10 years old at this point. My dad's like, the Reds almost got Vita Blue. And I'm thinking like, oh, free agency, like, someone outbid them or something. He's like, they had a trade in place, but Major League Baseball nixed it because they got Tom Seaver the same year, and they said they would have been too good, basically. I'm a 10-year-old kid, so I don't know if that really was the case, but it certainly kind of felt like it when you looked at the roster at the time, because that's like right before Pete goes to Philly, and everything kind of happens there.
Well, they left in 76, didn't he? I know Tony Perez left in 70 after 76. Wasn't it?
You might be right.
So I think they were even gone. So that the offense, like, they weren't the juggernaut they were in 75 and 76. Like, they had, like, could you imagine? Could you imagine Rob Manfred stepping in and doing something like that today?
Yeah.
Like absolute like.
They'd only lost at that point. They'd only lost Tony Perez, and they were back-to-back champs. I think it was the offseason before the 77 year. And Vita Blue, for those of you who don't know Vita Blue, I'm the old guy here. I don't remember Vita Blue, but I know what he. Yeah, I mean, he was great, and yes, and that I think competitive reasons were the reasons that Commissioner Bowie Kuhn nixed it. And Rob Manfred is in many ways a moron, but I actually can't see this day and age. No. Although in the NBA, they did that with Chris Paul there a couple of years ago. So a few years ago. So I don't know. Maybe
think about if Vita Blue were to go to the Reds, he'd be going to the back-to-back, World Series champions, and he was on the back-to-back World Series
right before that
champion 74, 73, 72 A's before that. So that's not a bad pedigree to come from and to step into.
Yeah, the Tom Seaver Vita Blue 1-2 punch probably would have been a little insane.
Oh, imagine when did Mario Soto, did he come in 78?
I think he debuted in 78. Yes,
so he would have still been there, and like, oh man,
oh my gosh, yes.
Bowie Kuhn skewered us out of 2 more championships.
Thanks for nothing, Bowie Kuhn. Hey Tim, this is not the prize for this week, but I'm going to suggest that in the future week you got to come up with a really good question, and what we'll do is we'll get Carlos to sign this.
Oh yeah,
and we'll give out a Carlos Guevara rookie card here on Late Night Reds Talk.
When Carlos and I started working together, I went on eBay and I found every single one of his rookie cards that I could get my hands on, like all of his Bowmans, and I ordered them.
Nice.
And when I showed it to him, he was like, "I think your top loader was probably worth more than the card." But how often you can say you got your buddy's baseball card? So
he's a good one, that guy.
Yeah, for sure. So we talked about this for a second, but let's kind of go through a few things here. This is the latest news in the transaction. So Connor Overton, Luis Cessa, obviously been named the 4th and 5th stars in the rotation. I think Connor Overton obviously having a pretty rough final spring training outing against the White Sox. Joe mentioned Hunter Strickland was let go. Chad Pinder was released. Steve Hadger was the guy who was sent as the last move, the player to be named later in the Guardians Will Benson trade, along with Justin Boyd. And then Chase Anderson, Brandon Williamson going to Louisville, and Matt Reynolds. So, Chad, this week on the Riverfront, which you can check out on Fridays on your local podcast channel, app of choice, you talked about Brandon Williamson. And, the thing you said, which kind of rang really true, is look, when you watch this kid pitch, like, talent is not a concern. Talent is not a concern at all. Mm-hmm. It's location of pitches. It's when things are down, how does he recover, is where we're kind of looking to see him take those next steps. And it feels like he didn't really have a chance to do that. He had a really, really, really rough outing against the Mariners. Funny enough, the team the Reds got him from, where funny enough, he and Suarez took him deep. So that was kind of crazy. But, I think Williamson's going to make a handful of starts for this team, obviously, especially when you see, like, I thought Connor Overton was really good before he got hurt last year. And obviously now it's, a lot of questions there, especially with the defense not be able to back him up the way they did in years past. But between those three, if we're going to have the season we feel like we're going to have, I almost feel like it's almost worth just putting Brandon Williamson on the opening day roster and just seeing what you can do, at this point.
Well, yeah, maybe again, and if you're comparing him to Connor Overton, I guess. Well, Connor Overton probably has less of a future in Cincinnati. Although I wish him the best of luck. I loved the 4-start stretch he had last year, but him with the outing he had in spring training just this week, the day after getting named to the Red starter rotation.
Yeah, it was a little deflating.
It was not good. It was not a good time. I can't believe if you're talking about these guys that are in the mix for it, that if you'd have told me a year ago that Luis Cessa would be the guy that I would trust the most in that 4th or 5th rotation spot, I'd be like, well, he's a pretty good reliever. I'm glad we got him. But what? And I would. Luis Cessa is going to probably not give you more than 5 or 6 innings, but he's okay. He's cromulent, as we say over at the riverfront. I don't know that I would keep Williamson up. I may have to disagree slightly. If the Reds made the decision to keep Williamson on the big league roster and let him start the year and name him the 5th starter, and so let him get acclimated to the big leagues, I'd be okay with that. I'm not going to argue with it. Certainly when you're talking about keeping Overton instead of him. But on the other hand, there may be something that is to be gained from Williamson going to AAA, getting a little more experience, getting some confidence against AAA hitters, maybe get that location down, the command down, and then bring him up later. He will pitch for the Cincinnati Reds this year. He will start for the Cincinnati Reds this year. So, especially given how it ended and reading his quotes after that, he was like, I wanted to be on the big league roster. It's not up to me now, but I didn't give him any reason to keep me, essentially, is what it sounded like to me. Let him go down with that hunger to get back. And I'm still hopeful for that guy. I'm still sort of bullish on Brandon Williams. I don't know what his ceiling is, but I think he can be a reliable big league starter, no question.
I kind of think that he's more ticketed for the pen long term, but yeah, he's definitely going to get a handful of starts up here. I mean, he's got a good fastball. He's got a huge sweeping, or huge curveball, 12-6. And I mean, it's again, that's what separates AA players from major league players, is not only finding the strike zone, but commanding the strike zone, throwing it where you want to hit it, to where it's a good pitcher's pitch. And he can't do any of that right now. You worry about confidence and things like that if he goes up here and gets absolutely hit around like a batting tee. Would he do any worse than Connor Overton? No. I think that I think that he'd absolutely do as well or better than Overton. Overton had those 4 good starts, the best 3-week span of his life. His peripherals were terrible. Not a lot of strikeouts, still giving up a lot of base runners. Absolutely just lucked his way through those starts anyway. So if there was any hope off of that 4-start stretch, first off, those were put to bed when he came back from his injury, and seeing what he's done in spring. Again, you don't take spring results. You should never take spring results for any, into consideration for a roster spot. But he wasn't fooling anybody. He was just absolutely just killed.
And you actually it brings a point that I can probably talk myself into agreeing with Tim now after disagreeing with him, which is that when Nick Senzel was a thing, and I was complaining on the podcast and in print about at Cincinnati Magazine about Nick Senzel not being called up, my whole mantra was the Reds need to have the best 25 at that time, 26 now. Why not have the best 26 guys in your organization in the big leagues if you can make an argument that they're ready? And I think there's an argument, is Williamson ready? And maybe not. But if we want the best 5 starters in the Reds organization that are, close to being ready, Brandon Williamson is one of the 5 best starters. And that's more of an indictment on the Reds than it is on Brandon Williamson's readiness. But you can really make the argument that he's the 4th or 5th best starter. That's big league level in this organization, and that actually kind of terrifies me now that I say that out loud.
Imagine like opening day last year, Graham Ashcraft was probably the 6th best starting pitcher, or on the depth chart, and we don't even know who the 6th starting pitcher would be. I guess Williamson would probably be the 6th starting pitcher in the depth chart, and you don't want any of the last 3 to throw one pitch at the major league level right now.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, Chase Anderson's another guy that got called down. He's probably a guy that, his short time with the Reds last year was not ideal. Really kind of struggled in his 7 starts that he had with the team. So he's obviously going to be down in minor league camp. One thing you guys kind of mentioned, and it's again really funny because on Chad's show Friday, he makes mention of, well, Hunter Strickland and Chad Pender, these are guys who are going to make the big league roster because that's what you expect the Reds to do, right?
Right.
So like you kind of got to we give them kudos here because these, yes, in years past, those guys are on the big league roster. Matt Reynolds is Wilson Valdez on this roster. You know what I mean? Like he is that guy. So I gotta give him props here, man, because like I said, like those are guys I fully expected to break camp, be on the big league roster, have their name introduced down the line on opening day. And instead, you're going to see guys like Will Benson's already been told he's making the team. That was obvious. But in years past, that might be a guy that you say maybe they send to Louisville for a little bit because his time with Cleveland last year, his short time in the big leagues didn't go very well. But they're saying, no, dude, like you're here too. So I think the roster construction for where their team is at currently, I'm very excited about.
Listen, Tim's calling me out a little bit there, and it's 100% fair. It's what call me out when I am wrong about something, but the way I try to.
But I would have thought you were right. So it's not like I'm like bashing you, but like, yeah, I'm with you.
No, please, when I get something wrong, just say it. Okay, I just think I hurt my feelings. But I hope that when I'm presented with evidence that where I should change my mind, that I'm fair enough to admit that just because I said something doesn't mean I need to stick to it. And very shortly after we released that podcast, boom, Chad Pender, boom, Hunter Strickland. And that's another reason why I said earlier that this team has more things to be excited about than last year's team. Last year, 12 months ago, Hunter Strickland, under these exact same circumstances, would have been on this roster. Chad Pender would have been on this roster. And now maybe we'll keep a guy that we have a little hope about that we might be able to. That's interesting. We know what Hunter Strickland can do, and Godspeed to him. I hope he latches on somewhere. I hope he has a very happy life. I'm never happy about someone losing their job, and I don't want to indicate that I'm celebrating someone losing their job because that's not a good thing.
No.
Right.
These are human beings we're talking about. But when you're talking about putting together a roster for a Major League Baseball franchise, I'm with you, Tim. I'm so happy that to have been presented with evidence that I was wrong, because that's a good sign. And it kind of comes back to this thing. I'm going to have to write about it at some point. But if you're put under the constraints that Nick Krall was put under about 12 months ago, it's hard to say he's made too many mistakes other than when he opens his mouth and says dumb things. It's hard to argue he's made too many mistakes in the last 12 months, given the constraints that ownership placed on him. So this is another example. So I'm incredibly pleased about this. I'm not pleased about these guys losing their jobs, but I'm pleased about what it says about the Reds.
Yeah.
Well, and Trent Rosecrans had Pender making the roster. I mean, Citron's this is his 16th season covering them, or somewhere in that. He's been covering since like 08 or 09, through all the different publications. He had Pender making the roster and Benson going out. And this is someone who's been around them and knows, not only sees what he sees, on the backfields and everything, but he has some kind of an understanding of how the front office thinks and clearly how they operate. And yeah, he had, I can't remember. I think he had Strickland on the roster too. I can't remember. I couldn't pull it up real quick. But yeah, I was surprised that all these places didn't have Benson making the original the opening day roster, but it sounded, it makes sense that they weren't. I mean, Chad, you were wrong, but you weren't. Your line of thought was definitely clear and made sense.
Yeah. I was wrong. I admit it.
First time for everything, right?
Yes.
I'm not necessarily going to say I'm heartbroken that Steve Hazard was moved in the final piece of the Guardians deal, because obviously we got him last year for Tyler Mahle in the Twins trade. But I would say I don't know if Steve Hazard, for where his issues are, could have gone to a better franchise to fix him than the Cleveland Guardians, because this is what they do. I mean,
yeah, and he'll get a shot. Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope the best for him. As my headphones fall out, boy, we're on a roll tonight for opening day, aren't we?
It's wonderful. It's still spring training for us. It's not opening day for us yet. We're still working out the kinks.
Yeah.
I'll say this about the Tyler Mahle trade. We got Luke Mahle in my head now. I wanted the Reds to sign Tyler Mahle and keep him around. I thought he's a good bet if he's healthy, which is, obviously with him, that's always a question, but to be a really good number 3 starter going forward. But when you look at what the Reds got in return for him now that the whole deal's been completed, I'm okay with it. I mean, we got Will Benson out of it, by a couple of moves there. And so obviously Will Benson's the greatest player in the history of the Reds. And so we
True.
win that deal.
Yeah, he would have started at center field for the machine.
What? Cesar Geronimo? Get out of here.
Yeah. The 90 team, this Eric Davis character, get Cleaves.
Who?
Yeah,
Haven't I ever hear of that guy ever again?
right.
Yeah, no.
Come on.
No, he
Yeah.
lacerated a kidney and Marge left him in Oakland, never to be heard from again.
Oh Lord.
That's some 1990 Reds World Series commentary for you.
Poor
Yeah.
guy.
Man. All right, so we're probably at the point at the end here for us before we play the interview with Jordan. But real quick before we do get out of here, get your guys' thoughts one last time before we get this on. We're going on record. Who leads the Reds in homers this year? Who do you guys pick?
Judd.
Joe? I'm going to vamp for a minute because I need to think. Who leads the Reds in homers this year? Okay. You know what I'm going to say? This is going to be me wishful thinking again.
Will Benson.
I almost said that. I want it to be Will Benson. Tyler Stevenson. I think he's finally going to find the power. I'm going to pick Tyler Stevenson. This is as always, this is just, don't wager on any of this, please. Okay. Don't take, this is just an exhibition. I don't know. I keep waiting for that power to come for Stevenson. I'm willing it into existence that he's going to be healthy this year, that he's going to play 150 games, 145 games. And that's my prediction. Tyler Stevenson. It's completely insane, but I'm going with it.
I'm going to go with Will Myers. Like, he's going to hit 22 home runs and then get traded at the trade deadline. I think there'll be a bunch of guys between 17, 20, but in that range. I think Votto is just going to be kind of in and out of the lineup. He'll probably have the highest slugging percentage, or at least have one of the highest slugging percentages. I just don't think he's going to hit 25 home runs. I just don't think he's going to be in the lineup enough to hit that number. But yeah, I'll go with Will Myers, and he's trade deadline. He's going to be shipped off to, we'll say, the Yankees at the deadline.
I was also going to go Will Myers, but I think now that Joe said that he's, with the whole being traded and stuff, I'm going to go wild here, boys. I'm going Jake Fraley.
Rake.
Oh, yes. Rake Fraley.
Yep. Think this is a Jake Fraley year, especially that pull hitter at Great American Ballpark. We saw Jesse Winker was successful with it. I expect Jay Fraley's fully healthy. I know he game plans on being in the lineup all year. Probably going to get more at best than he probably should, considering he can't hit lefties. So yeah, I'm going with Rake.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, he's a guy that I have no expectations for, but for some reason, it's kind of irrationally, I really want him to be good. I mean, I like the way he carries himself. I like the beard. I like I want to be a fan of his, I guess is what I'm saying.
I got a wild take. He's going to have more WAR, higher OPS plus than the original Jesse Winker.
Yeah.
I originally I'm like, well, he's a platoon candidate. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't hit lefties well at all, but you look at the roster and there aren't any right-handed hitting outfielders. There's Will Myers, who's going to be in the outfield, but also at first base and DH, and then Nick Senzel, who's jacuzzi more than he's in the lineup.
Watch it.
So yeah, I mean, he's gonna he's gonna luck into some home runs off the left, just because he's gonna be gonna get 80% of the at bats. Yeah, that's probably not a bad choice.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm telling the host he made a not bad choice. That's how you make sure you come back.
That's how you get invited back.
That's true. Does Jonathan India crack 25 stolen bases this year?
Yes,
100%.
I think so too. I think it's a 30 stolen base a year, dude. I'm stoked.
I'll bring it on. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
18 home runs, 35 stolen bases.
Oh my God, I'd cry.
Sign me up.
He's now slim. He's no longer trying to be the pull hitting slugger that he thought he had to be last year. Also, can we get him off second base and move him to the crowded outfield? He'd be a good right-handed, good left fielder, because he's going to be so bad in the field this year.
I do worry that he gets exposed.
His numbers were terrible even with even with with a shift, and now there's no shortstop or no third baseman coming over to help him out. He can't play out in right center field. It's going to be bad.
But I'll say what won't be bad is offensively. I think people are discounting him a little bit because of what happened last year. I'm here to tell you that was. I mean, I don't think he's going to necessarily be an all-star. Maybe he will. I think he's got the opportunity to be. But
Sure.
ignore last year. He was hurt. He was hurt. Okay.
And pressed.
Yes, right. And so right. And he came back earlier than he should have. And he was pressing. And I think he's going to be really good offensively. Now, what does that mean? I don't know what we talk about in terms of numbers, but we're going to be happy to have him in the lineup. I'm just guaranteeing that one if he's healthy.
If he plays, like if they have him at the top of the lineup, and I remember his rookie year, his numbers took off and they moved to the top of the lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And they when they were playing their more regular lineup in spring, he was batting leadoff and Votto was right behind him at 2. I like that number 1 and number 2 if they're if they're both healthy and in good shape.
With Will Benson number 3, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Probably.
Yeah, exactly. All right, final question before we wrap this up and we get to the interview. Who plays the most games at shortstop this year for the Cincinnati Reds?
All right, I'm just going to say it.
Ray
Kevin
Olmedo.
Newman. Ray Olmedo.
Ray
Felipe
Olmedo.
Lopez. It's going to be Kevin Newman. Maybe I'm being too pessimistic, but that's my prediction.
I'm going to go with Barrera. Newman's. I don't see Newman being here in August. I think he's either going to be terrible and he's going to get DFA'd, or if he's doing anything at all, he's going to end up getting traded to somebody who needs a backup middle infielder.
What do you think, Tim? Who's going to get the most starts?
Feeling oh so silky smooth, and just let it shine through. Just let your sun glow.
That will never get old.
Nope.
Never.
Nope. You guys gave me access to the StreamYard, so I can do what I want. So
That's right. It's all yours.
You haven't seen where Nate and I always do the that boy good and terrible clip in our our weekly awards, have you?
That's true. That's true. I also know like Chad and I, like before we bonded over baseball, we bonded over letterboxd accounts. So I feel like if I have movie references, I get to keep my job. So I feel like
Doesn't hurt. Does not hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, like Carlos is just like he said it one time and it just stuck with me forever. So is there like a way with the Riverfront that we can get like a Jose Barrera Soul Glow t-shirt made on the shop? Because I feel like we need to do that.
I will actually. My wife is good at that stuff. I get her on that, and I will have something up by Tuesday or Wednesday. I'll have it sent over, and we will have it up.
My man.
At the end of this week, we will have, if Joe, if you can deliver that, we will get it in our Riverfront shop and we'll sell that.
Yes.
Oh, it's amazing. I love it.
My wife's going to hate me for it, but hey, we're live. It's got to, like, we can't edit this out. This has to happen. Sorry, Cindy.
You're committed. You're pot committed.
Yeah. So we went about an hour here. Like I said, if you're checking us out, so my interview with Jordan Schusterman is 50 minutes long. But I promise it's worth the content. There's a lot of great conversation about the Reds here. So check it out. I know it's going to be a lengthy one for your podcast listeners in the morning. Hopefully you're not stuck in too much traffic, but if you are, you get to listen to the whole thing on your way to work for those who still commute to work, unlike me. But Chad, Joe, thank you guys. I'm really excited you guys came and hang out with me for our opening day preview. Really, really grateful. And I'll go ahead and play the interview with Jordan. I'll talk to you guys. Oh, I've got to make one quick mention, one announcement. So this week coming up, we'll not be on our regular Sunday for the live show. We're actually going to go Friday night this week. So if you check out the regular phone would be Thursday with their opening day recap, and then the next day we'll be live, and then we'll be back to Sunday the week after that. So want to make sure I got that out there. And hey, if you are still hanging out, want to hear the chat, the trivia question is still up there. So if no answers have been put out yet, so I'll give it to the end of the chat for everyone to get their answer in. But here, it's a really good interview with Jordan Schusterman of Cespedes BBQ. You all enjoy it. All right, folks, gracious enough to hang out with me today, my good friend. Third time's the charm now having him on the show, so I'm excited to bring him back. You can check him out with Cespedes BBQ, now local, as he tells me before we get recording. Jordan Schusterman. Jordan is going to be seeing quite a bit of GABP this year, from what I heard. So I'm very excited because I've been a fan of yours. I've been a fan of Cespedes BBQ basically since the beginning. So yeah, now I'm definitely going to fanboy out every time I bump into you. So
please, no, that means a lot. I mean, the people that it's crazy that this is We're basically at the, first of all, thank you for having me on. Very excited to be here.
course.
Yeah, this is like, we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of at Cespedes BBQ being created on Twitter. Now, the first few years of that was not a whole lot of, but again, all of this was an inside joke to begin with. So like, it was never meant to turn into a career, but we're very lucky that we get to, me and my good friend Jake Mintz get to do this for a living now. So, but yeah, I am indeed. I moved to Indiana last summer, and I am going to be Eastern Indiana, and I'm going to be checking out the Reds a good bit this year. So, looking forward to it.
Perfect. So, for those who don't know, who don't follow along, Jordan is a huge Seattle Mariners fan. So I have to start this show out by first saying thank you for Jake Fraley and Noelvi Marte. You're welcome for Luis Castillo and Eugenio Suarez, and I'm sorry for Jesse Winker.
Well, we should have led with Evan Arroyo because we know he's the real prize there.
Yes.
But yes, no, all of those points. It was very funny just kind of seeing the overlap there for me as I moved to sort of the area last summer and going to some of the Reds games at the end of last year and talking to people about Winker and Suarez and like how both went in very different directions once they got to Seattle. Winker obviously already gone. But yeah, a lot of overlap there. And even more, right? I mentioned Arroyo and Brandon Williamson, who ironically just got torched by the Mariners in spring training the other day. So that by literally Suarez, I think took him deep. So that was pretty funny. But yeah, it's kind of a random kind of overlap with those two massive trades. But I'm mad about it, man. Luis Castillo is the truth, as
Yes,
don't have to tell you. But I have to imagine that for Reds fans, it was some level of pride to watch him be as amazing as he was and to get kind of that national spotlight at the end of last year. And I think that's not, I know this isn't a Mariners podcast, but I think that Luis Castillo being on the team from the jump, not to mention that they extended him, is such an underrated part of them going into the season. Because I think there was a lot about their offseason that was underwhelming and disappointing in terms from a spending perspective. But like that is a huge deal that he is just now, penciled in for hopefully 30 starts that I think is being overlooked, which is weird because of how good he was in the second half. But anyway, you guys know how good Luis Castillo is here. But I'm here to talk about the Reds. Let's talk about the Reds.
Well, I can always talk about Luis Castillo, so
Yes.
I understand. So keep sticking on the pitching. Obviously, the theme for this team, for this year, kind of moving forward, is the first three in the rotation being Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, and Graham Ashcraft. My good friend and yours, Eno Saris, recently posted his bold predictions of the season on The Athletic, which is a great article for any baseball fan to check out. It wasn't just him being like irrational. He did a lot of research and going into this. But number 9, I believe, was Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, and Graham Ashcraft with the best young trio since the 2006 Florida Marlins. And look, it's really hard for me to not say, yeah, he's right, because obviously those three dudes are like, that's where the conversation starts with this franchise right now. That's what we're building around. We've been so excited about Hunter Green since he was on Sports Illustrated for Kids, and Tampa Bay decided not to draft him. Nick Lodolo was also a guy who was like, we couldn't believe we got him as late as we did in the first round. So, and Graham Ashcraft has become, fantastic. His slider looks unreal in spring training right now. So for the national perspective, what is like kind of your eyes like for these three guys kind of being the top of the rotation for this ball club?
Totally. And I reshared that because those three were such a big part of an article I wrote about for Fox. We've been doing over at Fox, we've been doing counting down, basically ranking all the organizations based on how much talent they have age 26 or under. So I basically wanted to, I kind of spearheaded this project with the thinking of farm system rankings are cool and have value because if you're just looking at prospects, you have a sense for the minor league system, there's value in that. And the Reds, of course, have a great farm system too. But I think we often lose sight of kind of the optimistic future of a team once guys graduate and are no longer on fancy prospect lists because they might still be on bad teams in the case of the Reds, right? And so Green and Ashcraft and Lodolo, none of them are prospects anymore. But like that is a hell of a trio as a core, all of which are age 26. And the way that we kind of put those rankings together, we ended up having the Reds 14th in baseball, which I know is maybe lower than, they are in farm system rankings. But it's also higher than a lot of postseason teams, right? It's higher than a lot of teams that have way higher expectations for this year. And a lot of that was because of the pitching. And we, with internally, we ranked the young, major league hitting, young major league pitching, and then prospect pitching and prospect hitting. And the Reds ranked better in pitching than I think all but, I want to say 6 or 7 teams. And that's just, again, including even guys in the big leagues, right? And so that is what we're talking about. And it is because of that trio that Eno wrote about so well. And I think, Ashcraft is really the key to it, because I totally don't blame people who pull up his baseball reference page and be like, why would I care about this guy? This dude had a 5 ERA and didn't strike anybody out. Because you haven't watched him. And I don't blame you because you haven't watched him. It's almost hard to fathom what that looks like. It's almost impossible to believe, especially if you're only looking at the service numbers and you're not looking at the numbers below,
Right.
With the ground ball rate and then, the hard hit rate and whatever. But it's almost impossible to fathom what that looks like, what a 5 ERA with no strikeouts looks like when you finally watch Graham Ashcraft, let alone what he looks like this spring, which is certainly maybe even a new and improved pitcher. I think it speaks to how good major league hitters are nowadays. I think it speaks to what, how important pitch shape is, and how just because you throw hard doesn't mean you're going to miss bats and all these things. But he's the key to the whole thing. At the same time, I don't want to overlook Green and Lodolo. I mean, they were getting strikeouts at rates that basically no other rookie pitchers were besides Spencer Strider, right?
Yeah.
And that is also a huge. Now there's some issues with both of them too, but no, there's a reason why it deserves this kind of hype, and it's going to have to go right, because otherwise, because I'm so concerned about, for as optimistic as I am about the pitching, I'm so worried about the offense. Moving forward, I know we can get to some of the prospects, but like for this year especially, I'm a lot more worried about how they're going to score runs. But if they can build around this rotation, they might not have to have that good of an offense.
Well, obviously you mentioned that part, and look, I totally understand. Realistically, yeah, there are questions. There are questions about, one, can Nick Senzel play, baseball? Like, is that step one?
Dude, I was such a believer. I think
Me
this
too.
might finally be the year I'm tapping out. I want. I mean, maybe now that I'll hopefully be going there every day or whatever frequently this season, I'll still believe. But I could not have been more in on Senzel, and now I just keep getting hurt. So, and he keeps getting hurt too.
Yeah, so it sounds like they're kind of they're trying to do the Ben Zobrist thing with him this year. They just basically keep him on the field, and hopefully that works. But like a guy like Nick Senzel, where there's a question mark. Spencer Steer is obviously probably, of the younger guys who don't have a ton of major league experience, probably the highest upside. And Jose Barrero is a name that everyone's always circling. It's actually had a really good spring. So, they obviously, like you said, the question of like, well, you're worried about those things, and understandably so. What if those three are good? Like, what if those three are good? How much does that raise the ceiling of this ball club?
The hitters, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so like who we're talking about specifically, Senzel, Barrero, Steer, because those are the ones we're expecting. So to be clear, and forgive me if I Encarnacion Strand is out of the picture for now, right?
For now, yeah.
Okay,
It sounds
right,
like
okay.
he will be the heir of Joey Votto. Is what
Got
it's
it.
kind of sounding
Interesting.
like.
Okay, got it. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know. I assumed that. I know early in the spring, I was like, wait a minute, is this dude gonna maybe break hip? And
Unbelievable.
I think so. Steer seems like he's in a pretty safe place. Again, I'm going to move Senzel aside. I think Barrero is maybe the most interesting one here, because when you have so many other shortstops coming up trying to take that job, he did have real prospect pedigree not that long ago, but he has been so uneven, very talented defender, obviously, and like flashes of offense. But he's the guy where the clock's really going to be ticking. Steer, clearly, they just traded for him. They clearly believe they want to give him run. There's no other obvious answer anyway to have to play third. So it's like he's going to really get his chance. Whereas Barrero, there's just enough other guys coming up where it's like, I don't know how long we're really going to wait there. And that's the thing. I mean, to me, it's way more important for Jonathan India to get back on track, for Tyler Stevenson to stay on the field, because those guys' talent I believe in. But India's season was even more concerning than any sort of issues with Senzel and Barrero and Steer. We just don't know anything yet. But ceiling for this year, again, I still really limited just because of what the rest of this offense looks like. But sure, I mean, it certainly would make me feel better moving forward. I still think that like longer term, 2-3 years out, there's so much in the system that there is to get excited about. That's going to be most important. For this year, I think Steer is Steer is the one that you really need to feel good about at the end of the season, and Barrero is the one that could sway in both different. I could see Barrero off the team, traded or something by the end of the year or the middle of the year, just because there's someone coming up that makes way more sense, whether it's Ellie or whoever.
Well, he has been playing center field in spring training this week. I don't know if you saw that or not.
Interesting. Okay, so
yeah.
and I imagine that is also a Senzel sort of reaction. So no, I did not see that. Okay, so now that's interesting, right? Because I guess otherwise it'd be Friedel. I don't know what Ciani is, if he's around or what his deal is.
He did not break major league camp. He's been sent down to minor league camp. Yeah, so he's one. One guy that people are really being excited about reading everything is Will Benson, actually, who they got really late from Cleveland.
I wanted to mention him. So don't love giving Cleveland Steven Hadger.
Yeah,
I know that was just announced of all the teams to maybe not be giving a former second round college pitcher. Cleveland
with shoulder issues. Yeah, they'll fix them.
Oh boy, so that one maybe doesn't look right, but I like Will Benson a lot. I mean, that's one I think. But the fact that they did have to give up Hadger, let alone Justin Boyd, I believe, was the other one. Kind of shows you what kind of value Benson had. I mean, he really just kind of got squeezed out. I think that was, you could say the same thing about a lot of the guys that Cleveland has traded. Nolan Jones, same kind of thing. Ended up trading him to Colorado. It's not that they were busts. It's that they just didn't have room, and they would have rather, the Rays do this all the time too, where it's like, we don't have room for them up here. He still has some trade value. Let's flip him. And so, I mean, what an opportunity. And I'm pretty sure Benson's played pretty well in spring as well.
Yes.
He is probably one of the most impressive physical baseball players I've ever seen in person. And also an awesome dude. So that helps. Cool. But yeah, really interesting player. He was, obviously again, looks like a football player. And in the minors, it was like, I don't know if he's going to put it all together coming out of high school, whatever. And like he was striking out like crazy. He hit a 4-homer game in low A, which I don't know if you've found that video before. One of the great minor. Oh, that's one of the better minor league highlights of the last 5-6 years was Will Benson's 4-home run game. So would encourage everyone to go check that out. But the adjustments that he made last season in AAA were stunning. The kinds of like fixes that you would think were not possible to make as you climb the minor league ladder, cutting the strikeouts, up the walks, didn't really carry over in his brief major league debut. But like, I love that for him, it's weird, he's younger than Spencer Steer. That maybe you treat him the same way, where it's like, go man, like go be the left fielder, go play every day. And like, let's see what we got, the ballpark should suit him perfectly. I think it's, I love, again, like they paid a fairly significant prospect price there. Like, I don't always love flipping the guys you just drafted 5 minutes ago, like, or relatively, like that always just feels weird. But at the same time, there's definitely a reason to be excited about him, because like with respect to the Fraley, Friedel, and honestly, Senzel has to be in this group too. What impact are we really waiting for at this point from those guys? Like they're fine players, but you're really not. The upside I feel like is way more limited with those guys than with a guy like Benson.
Yeah, I agree, and I think especially a guy like TJ Friedel was really, really good the second half post All-Star break last year. But how much more of that are you going to get from him? I hope a lot, obviously, but he's definitely got some worrisome there. I want to kind of change gears a little bit here. So you're someone who obviously follows a lot of what's going on in the ladder of baseball, and Cam Collier is a name that everyone is getting very, very excited about, and rightfully so. The fact he dropped to the Reds where he did, and the reasoning was something that fans couldn't believe, who are really experts with the draft. Our good friend Doug Gray of RedsMinorLeagues.com actually put Collier as the second rated prospect on the team, behind, of course, Ellie De La Cruz, and above Noelvi Marte and Edwin Arroyo, as you mentioned. What do you see in Collier that just says, like, because I saw him at Reds Fest this summer, and he was like, yeah, I've been working out with Ken Griffey Jr. You're like, what?
Yeah, yes. Yep. When your dad's Luke Collier, you have access to some pretty cool baseball players. Luke Collier was just coaching Team USA.
Yeah.
With Ken Griffey Jr., right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a totally reasonable take from Doug Gray. I think that it looks crazy because, the kinds of minor league numbers that Marte and Arroyo have already put up, which is fair. But Collier has the opportunity this year, as he is, what is he going to be, 18 the whole season?
Yeah.
I think he will be 18 the whole season. He will presumably go to Dayton, or no, I guess Daytona, obviously. Wearing a Daytona hat. He'll presumably go to Daytona, where he'll be one of the youngest players in the league. And then, he, there's just, you don't really get hitters like him, both in profile style, let alone out of high school. It just doesn't really exist. Like those guys, as I don't have to tell you, but like, you're normally looking at the Austin Hendrick type where it's like, damn, it looks good, but this is going to take some time. And so to have such polish at that age, and it makes sense because of the path that he took and who he's been around his whole life, it is a very unique opportunity. Now, at the same time, you compare it to someone like Evan Arroyo, who is also super young for his, like the bar is pretty high. Like I don't know. I think the question with Cam too is he is a very interestingly built player.
Mhm.
He is very strong. He's not, but like the power hasn't necessarily manifested in the same way that you might think, considering you look at someone who's already that big at that age. And so that's, I think, going to be the big question is the offensive, the acumen, the aptitude to hit is obviously there, but the ceiling, I think, is going to be determined by how many balls you're going over the fence. And I just don't have a great sense for that. Like this could be a situation where when you're that good of a hitter, you're hitting enough balls hard that they are just going to end up going over the fence, even if you don't have like 80 raw power. But also, like, it's also possible we just haven't seen him play enough in these environments that he does have, easy plus whatever. He's 18. So maybe he is going to get even bigger, stronger, and certain parts of his swing are going to unlock more power. So I think it's totally reasonable. I mean, again, when it's weird because when you're that young and that good, there's no reason to rush him. But also, if he's telling you he's that good, it's like, oh no, this is screaming.
Sure.
You are that good, and we should be moving you through the minors. And maybe you're making your major league debut by the time you're 20. But again, I don't think he's a factor this year. That's not saying much, but totally fair for him for people to be that excited about him. And it's one of those things where even though everybody knew he was a top 10 guy and he went whatever 17th or 18th, right?
Mhm.
Because he went 18th, he's just not on the radar in the same way than if he was in the top 10. That's just how this works. It's stupid because he's still got the fifth highest bonus, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like that's how we should determine it. But that's not how we do it. Okay, there's just a difference in hype between being picked 18th and being picked 8th. So, and obviously, admittedly, it's because he got picked by the Reds too. So like that's also it's harder you got to be doing some pretty crazy stuff like Ellie De La Cruz to really be getting a lot of attention from a national prospect standpoint.
Yeah, I wonder about that with this year's draft because with the lottery and the Reds fell to 7th, which is painful. O'Neill Cruz was probably about 99% going to go number 1 overall.
You mean Dylan Cruz?
Dylan Cruz, yes. O'Neill Cruz is already on the team, yes.
Yeah, they will have both Cruz here in a little while. I would imagine. But yes, that was a tough, not as bad as Oakland, but still a pretty tough lottery bounce because they dropped to 4 or to 6. Who are the Reds picking?
The Reds are at 7th.
Reds are at 7th. Oh, and Oakland is at 8, right?
Yeah.
Oakland is at 6. Oakland was in the top. Right. I remember. Okay. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, I will say really, really strong draft. You will still be getting a really, really, really good player. But yeah, no, that's a little unfortunate. I do a lot of draft stuff for fun. That's when I'm not doing all my other real baseball jobs. I'm doing draft stuff for fun. So I'm pretty locked in on that stuff. But we'll see. I think they'll still get a good player there.
Yeah, I hope so. You mentioned Tyler Stevenson earlier. Obviously, the big question with him is staying on the field because he's shown the absolute ability to hit and rake and is a really, really good player, has all-star upside. This is me just talking, obviously. But I don't think I'm the only person that feels this way. So I really love what they're putting together this year with this idea as far as this game plan to keep his bat in the lineup, as far as he's going to catch most days. When he's not catching, he's going to play first base one day, he's going to DH one day, and he's going to have a day off. Is kind of how they're going to do the rotation for him. And they obviously bring in Luke Maley, local kid, really, really good defensive catcher. Kirk Casale, who's been with the team before, can fill in for that DH when needed. What are kind of your thoughts on the catcher game plan for him? Because obviously, look, the game plan here is we just need him to have bats because we know what he can do. And also for Tyler Stevenson's sake, you're much more valuable as a catcher to a team financially than you are if you're playing first base. And so I think this is kind of a win-win for both sides.
Yeah, it's a really interesting balance because normally it's exactly what you just said. It's just like having a catcher, having an everyday catcher who can hit is just a massive, massive boon for any team, right? It's just hard to find. There's really not that many out of them out there. At the same time, when he has the capability of being your best hitter, you can't really worry as much about making sure he's also catching. You need to be making sure he's in the lineup. Whereas some other teams, it's like, well, we want him to catch and we want him to hit, but he's our fourth or fifth best hitter. So we can hit him sixth or seventh and like we could focus on him catching as much as possible. But obviously it's a different calculus because he, like I just said, could and maybe should be their best hitter. So I know I love it. I think it makes a lot of sense. I talked to him about it. I was down in spring for a little bit. Still a story I have not quite put together, but hopefully I will have that out at some point at Fox here in the next month or so. Because yeah, I think it is a fascinating amount of both pressure and lack of pressure to kind of ensure that he is going to be in the lineup all the time. So I love it. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I also think that like for a team in this position, not that Tyler's not a good defender, but Casale and Maley are perfect guys to have around. Those are exactly the kinds of guys you would want catching on other days for the pitching staff that we already talked about. So I think that makes a ton of sense. And yeah, I just like I just want to see him get 600 plate appearances. I think we all do. So however, whatever combination that ends up coming in will be interesting. Because that's the other thing. I'm trying to think of other examples of guys. I guess honestly, it was basically just Joe Mauer by the end.
Yeah. Joe
But
Mauer, Buster
other
Posey,
than that,
probably.
it's like normally once you start sliding away from catcher, you're just a DH or first baseman, and you're not still, getting back there every once in a while. So I think he could end up with kind of a unique split that we're not really seeing as much in the game anymore. But that's not a bad thing at all. I think that could be cool. Could work out well for them.
Yeah, I wonder what this does for that for the future. Like, does San Francisco do this now with Joey Bart? Does Colorado do this with Montero? Like, how does that work from here?
Well, Joey Bart can't hit.
Right,
So-
it's true. That's true.
Wait, who was the next one? Sorry, who?
Colorado, Montero.
Well, Montero's not a catcher, unless I forgot the one that they got from the Cardinals. I mean, he's a third baseman. So
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I'm losing my mind today.
no, you're good. But Joey Bart can hit. So it's like for him, it's like you need him to be catching to be valuable if he's going to be a confident catcher. So I'm trying to think of other examples you like that. I mean, so Cal Raleigh's a good example.
Yeah.
For the Mariners, where it's like. But he's an awesome catcher. Like he's like a clearly
really
plus
good.
catcher. But also he was getting beat up like crazy last year. He's also a maniac. He was playing with a broken thumb for the last however many weeks. But like for him, I mean, they want to ride him into the ground because it's so valuable to have a catcher that can be that. Like that's another version of franchise catcher. But that could come back to bite him, right? That could get to a point where it's not sustainable to have because it's just. You're just not going to last unless you're a freak like Yachty or you're a freak like Salvador Perez, or I guess Real Muto. Like it's just not. You're not going to last. It's not going to happen. And the injuries that Tyler's already dealt with is and I know that they've been freak things, but like you're still catching. Like that's what happens. you catch, you're going to get hurt. So I hope they can find a way. And it seems like he's fully on board with that kind of thing. There's some catchers that are like, no, I do want to catch every day. I think he recognizes too. Of course he wants to, but he's also smart enough to know that, like you said, it's in everyone's best interest to kind of figure out a balance.
Well, especially for the Reds, not just for the sake of how good he is. They went through this. Like we've had Devin Meserock on the show. We love Devin. Love him.
Mm-hmm.
Devin was supposed to be the next great catcher in Reds history and kept getting concussions, kept having issues, and like it just didn't work out. He ends up going to the Mets for Matt Harvey in one of the weirdest trades of all time. And
wow, throwback. I forgot about that deal.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I think that they're kind of maybe want to almost learn their lesson for this. Okay. Speaking of the Mets, I have to ask you this because it makes me laugh so hard. Obviously, terrible situation where Edwin Diaz gets hurt. Absolutely
Mm-hmm.
sucks, especially the way he gets hurt. Just terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I find it 100% silly. Not that I think the Reds wouldn't trade Alexis Diaz if the right situations there, but the fact that it's like, well, they're brothers, therefore the Mets will trade for him.
It's
because
like the
they're brothers.
laziest. This is a very New York media thing to do. Like,
Yes.
it's not. It doesn't make any actual sense. I mean, yes, like you said, awesome relievers on bad teams are the no-brainer.
Yeah.
Like extremely valuable trade assets. We just saw that in Detroit with Gregory Soto. There have been other. I mean, the Mariners traded Edwin Diaz. Like, I mean, there's versions. Like, the whole point of trading Edwin Diaz was to get Kelenic, and we know how that sort of worked out. But also to get off Cano. Like, really good relievers on bad teams are very obvious, fascinating trade assets for sure.
Sure.
Now, I also always think that that's especially goofy because people citing years of team control for relievers, I think, is always dumb because you have no idea what a reliever is going to do next year. Alexis Diaz could be the best reliever in baseball this year. He also might just walk too many guys and his ERA will be over 4. Like, that's, you just don't, it's just how it works. There's been so few relievers now that you can actually pencil in, you know what you're going to get every season, that being like, oh, well, and we haven't under team control for 2026. I'm like, great. Congratulations. You have no idea what that's going to be, let alone this year. So totally with you. Super goofy, lazy, honestly, for those takes. Also, they've already been shut down by like both sides.
Right.
I feel like, so it's like, it's just like, it's a very easy, well, the other part of it is like no one even realized until August of last year, like, wait a minute, that's his brother. And he throws just as hard and also has like, he is, right. So it feels like we're kind of on a lag for that whole realization for the general national audience anyway. And so it's just kind of like an easy thing to just play up and click, get people to click on it. So
I agree.
Irrelevant. I mean, again, could they trade Alexis Diaz? Totally. Does it have to be the Mets? No, that makes no sense.
No, and I think it's natural to expect he's going to have a little regression this year. Look, he was absolutely tremendous last year. Like, rookie, you mentioned relievers are relievers. It's so unknown. Rookie relievers are so unknown. And like what he did last year was unbelievably impressive. I still think he's going to be very good, but it's natural to expect he's not going to be what he was last year. And that's okay. It's just was what it is. So few more things I want to touch on before we get out of here. Because, obviously I can't have you on without talking about Joey Votto. It's got to be in the conversation every time. Yes. There's been a lot of weird mumblings the last few days when it comes to Joey.
Very weird.
Nick Kroll comes out and says, like, the goal is that he retires a Red, but if we're out of it at the trade deadline, he comes to me and says, trade me to the Blue Jays. I will I will see what I can do. Joey comes out and says, like, look, like I'm going to play well, which he's always that way. It's one of the things I love about him. And he says, like, if I don't play well, I will retire. I don't think that means he's going to Ken Griffey Jr. it and just leave in May, but I do think it's like, this will be my last year if that's the case. And look, my favorite Red ever, like absolutely my favorite Red ever, not just for the fact of what he's done for the franchise on the field, just a very fun dude to root for, very funny, very entertaining. But obviously we've been trying to game plan for life without Joey Votto now for a little while now, and that he has an amazing 2021 where he hits 30 homers. He has a shoulder issue last year. I think he's going to be good this year. I think that, like, right now I saw FanDuel has his over under at 18.5 homers. I think that's asinine. If Joey Votto's in the field, he's going to hit 24, 25 home runs. It's just how it goes.
Yeah, if he's healthy. I mean, I don't, because when we last saw him, it's just one of those things where it's like, I'm of two things. Because on one hand, you have to treat it like every other player who's 40, where it's like, why am I 100% counting on you to be the same by the time you get back? Because it just gets harder.
Yeah.
At the same time, we just talked about Votto on our NL Central preview podcast, and the 2 points I made: one, it's like never underestimate a future Hall of Famer. Not that he's Justin Verlander, but like Verlander's like, how do you come back at that age? It's like, well, the best of all time, you normally find ways to still be good even when you don't expect them to. And so that's why I agree with you. Now, related to the Crawl comments and whatever, I think we're heading towards and I said this on our podcast, but I'll say it here. I think we're heading towards a Clayton Kershaw situation where it's like Rangers or Dodgers, Rangers or Dodgers, Blue Jays or Reds, Blue Jays or Reds. And then if he's still good, he's basically just like deciding every year, like, well, I could go home. Now I'll just stay with the Reds. Oh, I could go home. I'll just stay with the Reds. I know he's much older than even Kershaw is now, but that's kind of what this smells like. Like, it would be stunning for him to get traded. Like, I could see him. Yeah. That would really, I guess if he thinks like, I want what's best for the organization, and what's best for the organization is like trading half a year of me, which here's the other thing about that is so hard to really fathom is like, again, the contract that the Blue Jays would even half a year. Like I just don't really see a trade making any sense under almost any circumstance. Now, is he going to be good enough for them to pick up $20 million team option? I think that is impossible. I think that is
right.
Not because there is no version of it. Like, I guess the only way is that he's basically back to MVP form and the Reds look like they can be contenders next year. That's the only way they're picking up a $20 million team option. That doesn't mean he's not coming back, right? But like he will in all likelihood be a free agent after the season in some form. And so that's when I think the stage will get to what is next for Joey. But I'm generally with you. Like, I do think that he will perform well, as he thinks too. So I think that needs to be the first step. I think even contemplating the next steps are still pointless because while I have confidence in him too, I do need to see it. He's 39, and I just, you know, it is as he's been, as we obviously appreciate his transparency and his openness. Like, he's saying like, yeah, I am not quite ready. So there's going to at least be some amount of ramp up here that I think is going to be necessary, but we're all rooting for him, obviously.
It's also a guy that's pretty well known for the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season is still finding his swing, you know? So it's like, it's just kind of adding to that. Yeah, dude, I'm 1,000% with you. I would love nothing more than to see him break the franchise home run record, but he's like 44 away from Johnny Bench at this point. So might be a little tricky. Yeah, a little tricky. But yeah, I'm with you. Because I know for him, just kind of conversations. Carlos, who's on our show regularly, is Joey's like one of Joey's best friends, and like he tells us all the time, is like, if he was not with the Reds and if he won a title with the Blue Jays, like yeah, he's happy, but he would not mean as much to him. You know, it's like Gary Payton won the NBA championship with the Heat does not mean what it would have he won with the Sonics. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of one of those kind of things. Not that I think the Reds are going to be moving to Oklahoma City. God, I hope not. But yeah, I think that's kind of a really big thing there. So like I said, a few more questions. National League Central this year is obviously not what it has been in years past. I know a lot of teams are very much like, you know, the Cubs had a busy offseason, but there's a lot of age and a lot of question marks there other than Dansby Swanson. Like, what are you going to get from Cody Bellinger? How do you feel for Wilson Contreras now that he's gone? The Cardinals are the Cardinals, like Tommy Edman, obviously really good. Tyler O'Neill, awesome. You got Goldie, you got Arenado, you know what you're getting from them. The Brewers, there's some question marks there too. And of course, the Pirates are the Pirates who, look, I think, you know, they signed Carlos Santana. That's a good move for where they are in their franchise. O'Neill Cruz, as we accidentally mentioned earlier, is very good. But I feel like very similar to the Reds where they're waiting on guys like Henry Davis to come up. Who we just talked about Tyler Stevenson. What does that do for Henry Davis in the future? It's going to be a really interesting dynamic as well. It's a weaker Central. How do you review the division as a whole? Like I said, you guys just did your podcast on the division, but what do you kind of see when you look at it? Besides, like, you know, the Cardinals will probably win by 12 games.
Yeah. Well, I think we start there, and that's I'm with you on that. And I think that people want to believe that Milwaukee is on St. Louis's level, and they were for much of last season. But I think you kind of saw the issues with Milwaukee by the end, particularly offensively. I mean, I agree that the Cubs offseason was not a lot of sure things, but I think they'll be better than last year. And so I know they were like quietly competent in the second half too. Pirates it's hard. So we also just did, the most recent one we did was our AL Central one, and did a lot of conversation about comparing the Royals and Tigers rebuilds. Mm-hmm. And I think the Reds and Pirates are also ones that you have to kind of look at together for very similar reasons, right? You have some really exciting talent in the minor league system, in the upper minor league system, right? Like guys that you think could make big impacts. You know, you have two giant shortstops named Cruz. You have owners that have no interest in spending any money, and you have very mixed track record of player development that makes you question how quickly you're actually going to put it all together Now, I think because of what we talked about, like I like the Reds group on the pitching side, I think a little bit better. And they have certainly moving forward. Like there's more questions beyond Keller and Contreras for the pitching staff, I think. I like Ortiz for Pittsburgh too. But on offense, like they brought in a lot more, adults in the room to kind of raise their floor. And so if you're comparing the Pirates and the Reds for this season, that would be a reason to be more optimistic in Pittsburgh, is I think that like they just brought in a lot of guys that you like. G-Man Choi is another one who's been just a really solid major league hitter, let alone guys like Rich Hill, who it's not just a matter of mentorship, but you're also just kind of raising the floor up on your whole team, I think. And to be frank, like Brian Reynolds is better than anybody on the Reds right now, and so there's a lot more going on there, but I also kind of feel better about where the Reds, like I think I would think the Pirates in 2023 and the Reds in 2024, if we're comparing those two. And then the rest of the division, like the Cardinals, the big X factor with the Cardinals is that their whole rotation is about to hit free agency. And so they have a lot of pitching question marks moving forward. Now their offensive core is as strong as it gets in the National League, and Jordan Walker's only going to make that better. So that's scary. Milwaukee, I think, is in a very strange place, and you could see them kind of taking a step back. That's the team I'd be a little bit more worried about for this season, and as far as taking the under. And the Cubs, I just think we just really have no idea yet. But we also know that they are the team that does have the spending power to kind of fast forward their rebuild if things are going well, whether that's trading for a big contract, whether that's signing a big free agent next winter in a ways that Cincinnati and Pittsburgh just aren't going to do. So much more pressure on Cincy and Pittsburgh to kind of have these player development wins. And there's a lot of guys there that could take those steps forward, but it has to happen because you quite literally cannot afford to be whiffing on guys if you're going to catch any, let alone St. Louis, but even teams like Milwaukee, because I think the ceiling on Milwaukee is limited, but like they've also established a pretty safe floor that, you just are going to need a lot of work to kind of get to.
Yeah. Like, don't be wrong. I think Will Myers is going to be good in Cincinnati. I just don't know how long he'll be here. I don't know if he's a deadline move. I don't know if he's here at the end of the year and he goes into free agency.
Definitely worth mentioning, though. Yeah.
But I think I think this is a great ballpark for him, as far as with his skill set and what he brings to the club. Also, I think people are going to love him here because of the no batting gloves thing. Cincinnati has like those, they find ways to find grit in people, and that's going to be like a grit thing for them. So I think he'll be a fan favorite this season.
I agree.
When do you expect, if you had to guesstimate, that we see Ellie De La Cruz in the big league roster? Do you think it's a September call up, or do you think it's next season?
Yeah, I don't know. I talked to C-Tran a lot about this when I was down in Goodyear. It seems like the consensus is he will be up at some point this season, but I mean, he didn't. How many AA games did he play last year?
Not too many.
Not too many, right? But like when it was going well, I mean, it was 47 is actually more than I thought. So he's a weird one because, again, I hate to keep comparing to the O'Neal Cruz thing. You're waiting for not for him to be a fraud, but like his skill set is one that is kind of predicated on just raw ability to the point where you're not being exploited. Like pitchers are going to know, even in AAA, what to do, what to just never throw him anything in the zone. And like O'Neal Cruz already showed us last year, you can still be impactful while swinging at everything. But also Ellie, I think, just has a better aptitude for hitting than O'Neal does. And so I think we'll probably see him this season. Like he could very easily torch AA, and then like I mentioned with Barrero, let alone Kevin Newman, like there's just going to be a point this season where it's like, what are we doing? Like, it doesn't even matter if we're in 4th or 5th place. Like, this is someone that is going to get butts in seats, which is going to be an issue for the Cincinnati Reds for a little bit here, especially if you keep insulting your fan base the way that ownership has it. That's at certain times, like, he is going to be tempting from that perspective, I think, in the same way that Hunter Green was. Not that he wasn't deserving to get called up, but like that's a guy that you want to go watch play. And like that is not something you're not paying to watch Spencer Steer play. I think he could be really good. That's how you build good teams. You have to have a bunch of competent players. But every once in a while, like, 10 to 20% of the top prospects, it's like, I need to go watch this, and this is true with O'Neal Cruz too. Like, I'm tuning into the Pirates to see what the hell he's going to do. That's just not that many of those guys in the league, and Ellie can clearly be that. And so I think that will also be tempting, regardless of his competitive, of the competitive window, regardless of exactly what he's doing and whether he's, lowered the strikeout rate from X to X or whether he's lowered the chase rate from X to X. Like, if he's putting up numbers in, Louisville, like, I don't think they're really going to wait. So I think it could be before September. I wouldn't expect it before the All-Star break, but I think that he'll be up this season for sure.
Yeah, I think it feels a lot like when Jay Bruce was coming up. And look, I know Jay Bruce did not turn out to be the player that Joey Votto did or anything like that. But if people don't remember,
Bruce was a great player, man.
If you do not remember the Jay Bruce minor league run, it was unbelievable.
Yeah, right, 100%.
Yeah,
no,
that's what this feels like.
He was one of, I mean, I don't know what I'm trying to think. Yeah, he was like the top prospect in baseball, right? I remember him being. This is before I was really covering. Like, I was in middle school, but like before I was really following prospects. But I just remember watching Jay Bruce in his early years with the Reds and knowing how big of a deal he was in the minor leagues. So yeah, no, totally. And this is now for him too, right? Like, I know at the time he was a little bit more athletic and less of a kind of a hulking, just bat only guy, but Cruz is a totally different thing, right? I mean, tools wise, there's really, who else has what he has in terms of combination of tools in the minors? Like,
Trey Turner?
I don't know. Yeah, exactly. So, but like, he could be like, I hope this is the other thing. Hope we don't freak out, if he's hitting 250 for the first few weeks.
They will.
AAA, they will. No, I know.
Yeah,
but let him take some time to figure it out, because players this talented usually figure it out one way or the other.
I'll never forget Hunter Green's first start for the Dragons. This is before Tommy John. Everyone's like, he gave up 5 home runs in low A, and it's like, relax.
Well, wait till he's giving up 5 home runs in the big league,
which he did,
which he'll still be doing. But I think Hunter Green is I know we didn't talk about it much, but he was basically immediately as a rookie, like poor man's Garrett Cole.
Yeah, you're right.
It's damn, strikeouts are insane, stuff is insane, and he's just getting blasted because the fastball is just slightly, and let alone, the same thing with the ballpark. Like, he's going to have that issue, same way Garrett Cole does in New York. Like, that's not going to change, right? Right field's not getting moved back. So he's going to have to figure that out. But that to me, Hunter Green did last year. He was the pitcher version of what Bobby Witt did in Kansas City, where it's like, holy shit, he is this talented. Like, it is all the raw numbers and the physical tools are that good. Yes, he gave up a ton of homers. Yes, he walked too many guys. Bobby Witt. Yes, his defense sucked. Yes, he never walked. Yes, whatever, his WAR ended up way lower than what it looked like he visually was doing and capable of. But it's like, if you're doing that at 22 in your rookie year, you're going to be ridiculously good. So that's how I feel about Green.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I've had you for a lot longer than I anticipated, so I appreciate you giving me some time. I do want to ask you real quick. So we just wrapped up World Baseball Classic, and I thought it was just an unbelievable tournament. It was so fun. Every game was great. I thought, as far as what you want from baseball, you couldn't have asked for a better last at bat at the World Baseball Classic, right? Arguably the 2 best players in baseball, with the full count and 2 outs and a chance to tie the game up. And, it's pretty unbelievable to ask for that drama. We've had a lot of conversations about how can we make this even better, which is crazy to say because this tournament was phenomenal. What did you take away from it? How much fun was it for you? I thought it was, as someone who doesn't work in baseball, I loved it. I can only imagine this being your career, watching this on a nightly basis.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. And just having high stakes games in March is just so cool. And I remember, I know a lot of, people in the industry older than me talk about how little people cared in the first few. And I understand that, but we keep making the point. It's and people who are hating on it be like, no one cares. It's so young, whatever. It's okay, but are we just supposed to never start new stuff?
Right.
Why wouldn't we want to try to build a tournament like this? But I also think, to your point, people being like, oh, how can we get this in the regular season? Oh, how can we have this? It's guys, that was awesome. Let's just accept that it's not that complicated, oh, well, what if the U.S. pitchers were? But it's like, yeah, of course we can always try to improve it. That's how we should treat every event and every sport and every, like, that's duh, right? But like, man, like that was sweet. And when you have something where guys really care, and the reason I bring up the earlier ones, because of course I don't remember following 06 or 09 and
Right.
even 13, but at 17, I remember bits and pieces, but that was also my senior year of college. And so like I was focusing on like finishing my senior thesis and like trying to like enjoy my last few months of college. Like I remember tuning in, but I also, so, you know, maybe I'm wrong, but it did not have nearly the same kind of impact. Now, and that is the value of having Trout play. That is the value of having Ohtani playing and the value of people understanding these players internationally better than they ever have.
Yeah.
Because we just have so much more access and so many more resources to see these foreign leagues and to learn about these players before they're actually on our televisions. It just makes all the hype that much better. And so it was awesome. I'm glad Japan won. I thought that was like they were the best team.
Yeah, I
and
agree.
They were the team that was built to win it, and they were the team that treated it as seriously as everyone should. And yeah, they're the best, and Otani's the best. And it was the coolest standing of all time, and it felt all fake. And I think we should all just be grateful for that. And like, don't overthink it. Like, that was awesome. There's no need to have every game in the regular season feeling that important, right? Like, baseball, like the reason why I never get tired of it, and the reason why I can do it as much as I do without getting burnt out is like, find different flavors of baseball and enjoy them, right? Because it doesn't need to all be the same. I don't need all the players to be the same. I don't need every game to feel like it's the most important game in the world. Like, but what attracts the thing that makes anything meaningful is like you watch the people care about it, right? Like, this is why I like college baseball, because
Yeah.
the stakes feel way more significant than a May regular season game because the players care way more about it. And so when you expend that to international baseball, like, it was obvious, and it was so cool, and all the random, let alone Trout Ohtani, but just like all these kinds of really cool matchups that we just don't get to see was fantastic. So, and of course Ian Jabot, repping Great Britain, very
Yeah.
fun to watch there. So I'll make that Reds connection there because I talked to Ian about it before WBC. Like, I saw him in Goodyear at the beginning of camp, and he was amped. Like, he was like, and he had no idea what he was getting himself into either, right?
Yeah.
But like, I know he talked about it after, and he was like, yeah, that was an incredible experience. Like, it was even better than he could have hoped. And so I think that's how most people came out of it. And yeah, man, I'm very lucky to get to cover that and watch it.
Yeah, I've meant to find an Ian Jabot conversation there, so I'm glad you brought it up because your name is obviously today. Number one Ian Jabot fan, which I love. I think last year, one of the things you brought up, so what you were on was Reaver San Martin. So I appreciate you always find like these like niche Reds pitchers. So
well, we've talked about, he looks like Jimmy Butler, right? We're all on the same page
dead
about
on,
that.
Dead on.
I don't know if I've ever seen a more of a doppelganger like in cross sport. Like, I mean, it's almost reminds me of like the Kyle Korver, Ashton Kutcher situation, but even crazier. It's amazing. Yeah, he's great. And he was in WBC, right? He was on Team Columbia.
Yeah, and then Luis Cessa was on Mexico, but
Yep.
left early to come back to compete for the one of the last starts of the rotation.
Yep. So no, it was cool. There was a lot of goals. Yeah, listen again. I wanted to go Ashcraft, but it seems like people about to really know about Graham Ashcraft. So I got to give Ian some love. He's a very, very good dude, and I've gotten to know him through some other mutual baseball friends. So definitely wanted to shout him out, and I also think he's going to have a big year that's definitely a Reds reliever I'm excited about for sure.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited for him. So Jordan, like I said, you gave me 50 minutes of your time. I'm very, very appreciative of you always hanging out with us every year. I'm so excited you're now a local, that we're neighbors now. So I can't wait to see you at the ballpark this summer. Actually, like I said, I'll text you Thursday for sure. We'll maybe hang out for a bit. Before we get out of here, please take just a second to shout out Cespedes BBQ, where people can find the podcast, the socials, by all means, man.
Yeah. This is going to be our busiest season yet. Just a lot of jobs now. So, I mean, at Cespedes BBQ, you can find all of our stuff. All of our writing is at foxsports.com. And podcast wise, Baseball Barbacast, SiriusXM Podcast Network. We're going 3 times a week now, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, wrapping up our division previews. A lot of fun stuff. Just announced some merch. We have another big announcement coming up tomorrow that I cannot say about yet, but very big stuff coming up this season. So Baseball Barbacast, check that out. If you like college baseball, we also do a podcast with our friend Stephen Schock called The Shock Factor over on the D1 Baseball Podcast Network. So if you like college ball, highly recommend you check that out as well. But yeah, man, there's no shortage of stuff we got going on, and hopefully I'll join you. We don't have to wait until this time next year. Like, I'll happily come on again soon. So hopefully
Sounds
I will
good.
see you. I will see you at opening day. And if
Yeah.
anyone else listening this, sees me around, please say hello.
Perfect. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Jordan. I appreciate it.